The woman wanted to inherit her wealthy husband's fortune, so she forced him to dive into the water and hold his breath for 5 minutes. 10 minutes passed, and he still hadn't come up. Casey thought her plan had finally worked, but the next second, the man happily surfaced. It turned out that when he was young, he had been a skilled swimmer. Holding his breath underwater for 20 minutes was his limit. Seeing her plan fail, Casey then asked him to perform a 100-meter dive. Under the coaxing of his beautiful wife, the man didn't hesitate. He leapt straight off the 100-meter cliff nearby. His 200-pound body slammed hard against the lake's surface. This time, he never came back up. To make sure nothing could go wrong, Casey pretended to cry on the boat and called out to him for half an hour. Only when she was certain he couldn't possibly survive did she reveal a satisfied smile. However, before she could celebrate inheriting billions, she suddenly realized she didn't know how to operate the luxury yacht, although the shore was only a few hundred meters away. For Casey, who couldn't swim, it was like facing certain doom. She picked up her phone to call for help, but she was in a remote lake deep in the forest. There was no signal at all. As time ticked by, Casey knew if she stayed like this, she would eventually starve to death. She shouted desperately at the water, begging her husband to come back to life just long enough to teach her how to drive the yacht. But clearly, this was useless. In despair, she sat in the chair and cried helplessly. Soon, another 2 hours passed. Casey knew she couldn't just sit there waiting for the end. She went to the yacht's control panel and tried to drive it. When she pressed one of the buttons, the anchor was lifted successfully. She thought this would let her head back to shore quickly, but as soon as she pulled the throttle, the yacht roared forward at full power and began spinning in circles on the lake. Casey was thrown hard onto the deck. To avoid being tossed into the water and drowning, she rushed to pull out the key to stop the yacht, but she lost her balance, and the key slipped from her hand into the lake. The yacht's engine stopped, but with the anchor raised, the boat continued drifting with the current and the wind. Just as Casey hoped the yacht might drift back to shore on its own, she suddenly saw a waterfall ahead. She couldn't tell how high it was, but if it was over 10 meters, she would be shattered to pieces. Terrified, she gathered her things, ready to escape, but facing the deep water, she had no courage to jump in. At that moment, she spotted a life ring on the yacht. She untied the rope and tossed it into the lake. As the life ring floated farther and farther away, Casey froze in shock. Her only chance of escape was gone. With no other options, she could only hide inside the yacht and wait for a miracle. Before long, the yacht reached the edge of the waterfall. The current dragged it forward at full speed. The yacht, along with Casey, plunged down a 2-meter cliff. A few minutes later, Casey was lucky enough to be washed ashore after only swallowing a few mouthfuls of water. Once she caught her breath, she quickly pulled out her phone to call for help. But deep in this remote forest, there was still no signal at all. To ease her frustration, Casey opened a bottle of red wine and took a few sips. Then she applied an eye mask to take care of her skin. Casey realized she couldn't just wait around. Her only choice was to cross the forest and find her way back to civilization. Afterward, she put on a full face of makeup. Then she changed into a beautiful long dress and slipped into a pair of 10-centimeter high heels. With that, she began her so-called adventure into the wild. But just a few minutes later, a trail of massive footprints appeared in the mud ahead. Casey looked up and saw a bear drinking water by the lake. She froze in place, not knowing what to do. It didn't take long before the bear noticed her. Seeing it quickly move toward her, Casey turned and ran, but wearing high heels, there was no way she could outrun a bear. In a panic, she kicked off one of her heels and threw it at the animal. To her surprise, the bear seemed interested in the scent left on the shoe. While it was distracted, she sprinted barefoot into the forest. Soon, night fell. The temperature in the woods dropped close to freezing. To avoid freezing to death, Casey picked up a stick and tried to start a fire by rubbing wood together, but it was clearly impossible. As she hopped around to keep her body warm, a mysterious white creature suddenly appeared in the distance. Terrified, Casey turned and ran, but after only a few steps, she tripped over a dead tree and fainted on the spot. When she woke up again, she realized the white creature she had seen last night was actually just a fox. By now, she hadn't eaten in a whole day and night, and her stomach was growling. Desperate, she pulled out a bottle of sunscreen from her bag and tried to taste it for food, but the moment it touched her lips, she knew it was definitely not edible. The fox seemed to notice Casey's hunger. It led her to a nearby lake in search of food. There, Casey discovered a patch of colorful mushrooms. She picked them up and elegantly brought them to her mouth. before long, she had eaten her fill, but soon after, her vision darkened, and she felt dizzy. It turned out the mushrooms she had eaten were poisonous. Luckily, the toxin wasn't very strong. By the next day, Casey gradually recovered, exhausted and barefoot. She continued wandering through the forest. Then she spotted a wisp of smoke rising into the sky. Where there's smoke, there must be people. Without hesitation, Casey rushed in that direction, but when she arrived, she discovered the smoke had come from a pile of dead wood that had caught fire on its own. Just as Casey stood there in shock, a burning tree suddenly fell toward her. As expected, the massive trunk pinned her tightly underneath. In that moment of despair, the fox appeared again, scratching the dirt beside her. Seeing this, Casey instantly understood how to save herself. She began digging into the soil just like the fox. After hours of effort, she finally managed to push the tree aside and crawl free. To avoid being hurt by the spreading fire, Casey scooped up the fox and hurried away. Before leaving, she grabbed a burning branch to use as a fire starter. That night, Casey lit a campfire, held the fox in her arms, and prepared to rest. But before long, heavy rain began to pour down from the sky. Casey had no choice but to run with the fox into a cave for shelter. However, just as she was about to fall asleep, she felt something tickling her feet. She looked down and was horrified to see hundreds of rats living inside the cave. Startled, Casey rushed back out into the storm. By then, the rain outside had grown even more violent. In despair, she shouted angrily at the sky, asking, "Why are you treating me like this?" The next morning, Casey was woken by the roar of an engine. Down in the river below, a speedboat was racing past. She immediately shouted for help, but with a distance of at least 200 meters, her voice couldn't reach them, so she tore off her clothes and waved them desperately. Luckily, the people on the boat finally noticed her. They gave Casey some canned food and cooked meals, but Casey couldn't shake the feeling that something about them was wrong. She told them she had come here with her husband, but during their trip, he had an accident and didn't survive. Now, not knowing the way back, she had been trapped in the forest. When the men realized she was alone, dark intentions grew in their minds. They dragged Casey deeper into the forest. Casey knew she was in grave danger. For the sake of survival, she screamed for help and begged them to let her go. But how could they give up their prey so easily? Just as one of the men was about to act, a woman suddenly appeared behind him. With one swift move, she struck him down. It turned out this woman was Haley, a forest ranger in the area. After learning that more than one attacker had targeted Casey, Haley quickly pulled her onto the speedboat to escape. But their getaway was soon noticed by the other three men, armed and chasing from behind. The men fired as they pursued. Haley, with her expert skills, used a sharp turn around a reef to shake them off with ease. To avoid being tracked any further, Haley found a spot along the shore. She grabbed Casey and ran straight into the depths of the forest. Having gone days without proper food, Casey couldn't keep up with Haley's pace. Frustrated, she began to complain. "Why did you have to kill that man? I was ready to compromise just to survive. Now, if we get caught again, it'll surely be the end for me." Hearing this, Haley grew angry. She had risked her life to save Casey, yet all she got was blame. The more Haley thought about it, the angrier she became, and she ended up giving Casey a harsh beating. Afterward, to prevent the men from catching up and putting them in danger again, Haley gathered some dry branches to set traps nearby. But at the same time, Casey calmly put on lipstick and touched up her makeup as if nothing had happened. Once Haley managed to light a fire, she urged Casey to leave the area quickly. Sure enough, only a few hours later, the men spotted the smoke and tracked them down. Haley's traps worked, taking out one of the attackers. Only then did their leader realize they had definitely fallen into a trap. Meanwhile, Haley had already taken Casey through a side path to find the men's speedboat. They were planning to steal it and escape, but Casey, used to a pampered life, simply sat on the boat, no matter how much Haley shouted for her to help push it. Casey didn't move at all. Before long, the men caught up. The leader fired a shot that hit Haley in the thigh. Even so, Haley used the last of her strength to finally push the boat into the water. She thought they could jump on board and flee immediately, but Casey didn't care about Haley's condition. She hid inside the boat, too scared to move. Sadly, Haley was captured by the men and dragged into the woods. Just as the leader was about to finish Haley off, she told him she had the protection of the mountain god. If he harmed her, the god would punish him. When the leader didn't believe her, Haley looked up at the sky. Then she let out a piercing cry, as if reporting him to the heavens. Within seconds, the forest was struck by howling winds and heavy rain. Frightened, the leader grabbed Haley by the throat to silence her, but at that moment, one of his own men suddenly stabbed him from behind. It turned out that this man also believed in the mountain god. Fearing punishment himself, he had no choice but to turn against the leader. Just as he was about to set Haley free, Casey suddenly appeared. She struck him from behind with a stick and knocked him out cold. Haley noticed the leader was still alive and ready to fight back. She quickly grabbed a shotgun and ended it once and for all, taking down the rest of the men. At last, the danger was completely over. Back in the city, Casey successfully inherited her wealthy husband's fortune. To thank Haley for saving her life, Casey decided to share her newfound wealth with her.